The starving knock. The night was cold, the kind of cold that made the air sting inside your nose when you breathed. Liam was almost asleep when a sound pulled him back to waking. It was a soft knock, almost too soft to be real at first. He thought it was the wind tapping against the wooden door, but then it came again, gentle but desperate. He sat up, listening. The old farmhouse was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock and the faint hiss of the stove in the kitchen. No one ever came to his home this late, not in this weather. Liam pulled on his coat and stepped into the small hallway. The knock came again, faster this time, and a weak voice followed. "Please." Liam's hand froze on the door handle. The voice was high and trembling. Not a grown person's voice. He opened the door a crack, letting the icy wind rush in. Standing there was a tiny figure, no taller than his chest. Her skin was pale green. Her hair thin and damp, and her eyes huge and dark were staring straight at him. In her arms was a bundle wrapped in worn cloth. "Just milk for my sister. Please, I'll pay you back when I'm grown," the girl whispered. Her lips were blue from the cold. Her feet were bare, toes red and raw against the snow. She looked like she had been walking for hours, maybe days. Liam's heart clenched. He had seen aliens before out in the markets in the human colony, but never one so young. Never one so fragile. The snow swirled around her small body, and she swayed on her feet as if the wind itself might knock her over without thinking. He opened the door wide. "Come in," he said. His voice came out rough. The girl hesitated, glancing over her shoulder into the dark night. Then she stepped forward, clutching the bundle tight. Liam shut the door quickly and locked it. Inside, the warmth from the stove hit them. The girl blinked as if the heat itself hurt after so much cold. She stood in the hallway, not moving, not speaking, only shivering. Liam took her coatless shoulders gently and led her into the kitchen. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the bundle in her arms. Liam pointed to a chair. She sat, keeping the bundle close to her chest. He poured a cup of warm milk and set it in front of her. But she shook her head and whispered, "It's..." For her, she unwrapped the cloth just enough for Liam to see. Inside was a baby smaller than any he had ever seen, its breathing shallow, its skin dull and almost gray. The girl dipped her fingers into the cup and touched them to the baby's lips. The tiny mouth opened weakly. Liam felt a lump in his throat. "When did you last eat?" he asked. She didn't answer, just kept feeding the baby drops of milk. Her hands were trembling so much the cup rattled against the table. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows. Liam stepped to the window to check the yard. That's when he saw them footprints in the snow, not small ones like hers, but larger, heavier. The pattern told him there were at least 2, maybe 3, and they were fresh. His stomach tightened. He walked back to her. "Who's out there?" asked quietly. Her eyes flicked toward the door, fear flashing across her face. "They're coming," she whispered. "Please, don't open the door." The way she said it made the hairs on his arms rise. Liam didn't know who they were, but the way her voice cracked told him everything he needed to know. Whoever they were, they were not friendly. He thought about asking more questions. But the baby let out a small, pained cry, and the girl focused back on her sister. Rocking her gently, he started the stove burning hotter, fetched a thick blanket, and draped it over the girl's shoulders. She flinched at first, as if not used to kindness. Her eyes darted around the room, memorizing every corner, every window, like someone who had learned to never feel safe. "You can stay here tonight," Liam said. She didn't look up, but her shoulders relaxed a little under the blanket. She murmured something he didn't catch. Maybe a thank you. Maybe just a prayer. Hours passed slowly. Liam sat in his armchair, watching the flames in the stove. The girl stayed at the table, never letting go of the baby. Every now and then, she would glance toward the window, her body tense. Liam noticed her ears twitch at every sound: the creak of the house, the sigh of the wind, the far-off howl of some animal. Then, sometime past midnight, there was movement outside. Liam froze. He could hear it, the crunch of snow under boots, slow, deliberate, coming closer to the house. The girl's head snapped up, eyes wide. She clutched the baby tighter, whispering in a language he didn't understand. Liam moved quietly to the door and peered through a small crack in the curtain. A shadow slid across the yard, tall and broad-shouldered, then another. Their heads turned toward the house. And Liam's heartbeat thudded in his ears. "They found us," the girl whispered. Her voice was barely there, but it carried the weight of pure fear. Liam gripped the rifle hanging by the door. His hands tightened around the cold metal. He didn't know what he was about to get himself into. But one thing was clear: sending her back out, there was no longer an option. Outside, the shadows stopped moving. The only sound was the wind. But Liam knew they hadn't gone. They were waiting, watching. And so he sat down at the table across from the girl, looked her in the eyes, and said, "No one is taking you or your sister tonight." The girl's lips trembled, her eyes glistened, and for the first time she nodded, a small, fragile sign of trust in a stranger she had just met. The morning light crept slowly into the kitchen, painting the worn wooden walls with a pale gold glow. Liam had dozed in his armchair, his rifle resting across his lap. His eyes opened to the faint sound of soft breathing. For a moment he wondered if the night's events had been a dream, but then he saw Hertha, alien girl, still sitting at the table, the baby sleeping in her arms. Her head was tilted down, her thin hair falling over her face. The blanket he had given her was still wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Liam stood quietly, not wanting to startle her. He moved to the stove, put on a pot of water, and added a handful of oats. The smell of breakfast filled the air. Her eyes opened slowly, still clouded with sleep. Oh. She blinked at him, as if unsure where she was. Then her arms tightened around the baby, and she sat straighter. "You're safe," Liam said in a calm voice. "Both of you." She didn't answer. Her gaze dropped to the floor. Liam set a steaming bowl of porridge in front of her. "Eat," he said. The girl hesitated, then shook her head. She dipped her fingers into the warm milk jug instead and touched them to the baby's lips. The child stirred, making a tiny sound. "You need food too," Liam said firmly, but she kept her eyes on her sister, refusing to take a bite. Her devotion was sharp and unyielding. Like a shield, Liam sat across from her. "What's your name?" he asked. Silence. She avoided his gaze, tracing the rim of the bowl with one finger. It was as if she believed her own name was dangerous. The old farmhouse felt unusually still. Outside, the snow-covered yard stretched wide and empty. But the image of those footprints from last night sat heavy in Liam's mind. He didn't know who the shadows were or why they were after these girls. But he could feel the weight of the trouble following them. He noticed her hands, small, trembling, and raw from the cold. Her fingers had small scars, old ones, as if she had been working with rough tools or carrying things far too heavy for her size. Liam wondered what kind of life she had come from. He had seen poor families before, but nothing like this. "I can help you," he said slowly. "But you need to tell me who's after you." Her head lifted slightly, just enough for him to see a flash of fear in her eyes. "If they find you here, they'll take you both." Liam added, her lips parted as if to speak, but she closed them again. Instead, she said in a whisper, "Please, just don't open the door." That answer told Liam more than a full story could. Whoever was out there, she believed they were worse than the cold, worse than hunger. He decided not to push her. Not yet. The baby stirred again, making a small, weak cry. The girl began humming softly, a tune unfamiliar to Liam, low and trembling but strangely soothing. For a moment, it was as if the danger outside didn't exist. Liam's eyes wandered to the window. The world outside was painfully bright after the night's darkness. Sunlight bounced off the snow, making it hard to see far. He noticed a faint line of indentations leading away from the house. Maybe the shadows from last night had retreated to the woods. Or maybe they were still close, waiting. The kettle whistled softly. Liam poured himself tea and sat back down. "I'm Liam," he said. "I live alone here." She glanced at him briefly, then back at the baby after a long pause. She murmured, "Mira." The name was quiet, as if she wasn't sure she should share it. "Mira," he repeated, letting the name settle in the warm kitchen air. She didn't correct him. She just continued rocking her sister. They stayed in that strange silence for a while. It's the only sounds, the baby's tiny breaths and the occasional creak of the house. Then a sudden noise outside made Mira stiffen. Liam was on his feet instantly, crossing to the window. It was nothing, just snow sliding off the roof, but Myra's reaction told him she had been living on the edge of fear for a long time. She had probably been running, hiding, never knowing where the next threat would come from after breakfast. Liam lit a small fire in the other room. "You can rest there," he told her. But she shook her head. "Here," she said, nodding toward the kitchen. It was clear she didn't want to be far from the door from watching it. The day passed slowly. The snow outside thickened, covering the yard in a fresh white layer. Liam did small chores around the house, but his mind kept returning to the same thought, the shadows in the snow. He didn't like the idea of waiting for trouble to come knocking. Late in the afternoon, Mira spoke again. They want her," she said, her eyes on the baby, "not me." Her voice cracked on the last word. Liam froze, wanting to ask why, but before he could, she shook her head sharply, pressing her lips together. It was all she was willing to say. As evening fell, the sky turned a bruised purple. Mira stayed in the chair, her body stiff and ready to move at the first sign of danger. Liam sat nearby, rifle within reach. The baby slept, breathing a little easier now, with warmth in her body. When night came, the world outside seemed to hold its breath. Liam checked the windows one last time before banking the fire low. Mira's eyes stayed fixed on the door, as if her will alone could keep it shut. In that heavy silence, Liam knew one thing for certain: this was no ordinary visit from strangers. And if he let his guard down, the next knock on his door would not be a starving child, but the ones who had been hunting her all along. The night pressed against the windows like a living thing. The wind had quieted, but that only made the silence heavier. Liam sat in his armchair, his rifle leaning against the wall beside him. Mira was still at the table, the baby wrapped tightly in her arms. Her eyes were open, wide and alert, as if she could feel danger drawing closer with every passing hour. It started with a sound so faint Liam almost thought he imagined it, a crunch in the snow, deliberate, measured, not the random noise of an animal. Myra's head turned sharply toward the window, her whole body going still. The baby stirred and whimpered. Sensing her sister's fear, Liam rose without a word and stepped quietly to the curtain. He lifted it just enough to peer outside. The moonlight spilled over the yard, turning the snow into a silver sheet. At first, he saw nothing, then movement. A shadow slid across the ground near the barn, tall and lean. It moved like it knew how to stay hidden, but the snow betrayed every step. Mira's breath caught. "It's them," she whispered. Her voice was barely there, but the way she said it made Liam's skin prickle. He lowered the curtain slowly. His heart thudded hard in his chest. "How many?" he asked. Myra shook her head. More than last time, her gaze flicked toward the door, as if measuring the time it would take to reach it if they had to run. Liam checked the rifle, the metal cold under his fingers. The old weapon wasn't meant for long fights. It was for scaring off predators in the fields, but it would have to do. He stepped quietly through the house, checking the back windows. That's when he saw them, two more figures standing near the edge of the tree line, unmoving, watching. The way they stood made it clear they weren't just passing through. They were here for something or someone. Liam glanced back toward the kitchen, toward Mira and the baby, and felt the answer settle heavy in his gut. The baby began to cry softly, the sound breaking the stillness like a stone hitting glass. Mira tried to soothe her, rocking her gently, whispering words in that strange melodic language. But the cry seemed to grow louder in the quiet night. Outside, one of the shadows shifted, turning its head toward the sound. Liam's grip on the rifle tightened. He didn't know how much these hunters could hear, but he wasn't about to test it. "We need to keep her quiet," he murmured. Mira nodded, tucking the baby deeper under the blanket, pressing her own cheek against the child's tiny head. Slowly, the cries faded to soft whimpers. Liam let out the breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The minutes stretched. The shadows didn't move closer, but they didn't leave either. Liam could feel them just beyond the reach of the lantern light, patient and waiting. It wasn't the kind of patience that came from uncertainty. It was the patience of people who already knew they would get what they came for. "Why her?" Liam asked suddenly, keeping his voice low. Myra hesitated. Her eyes dropped to the bundle in her arms. "Her blood," she said finally. The words were soft, but they hit Liam like a punch. "They say it's rare, worth much." She swallowed hard. "They will not stop until they have her." Liam's jaw tightened. The thought of a Chaldini child being hunted for profit made his stomach turn. "Then they'll have to go through me first," he said. Myra's eyes flickered with something, fear, maybe disbelief, or maybe the faintest spark of trust. But she didn't answer. Outside, a faint whistle cut through the air. Low and sharp, the shadows moved, spreading out. Their shapes melted into the edges of the yard, and then they were gone. Liam stayed by the window, watching. His instincts told him they weren't retreating. They were circling, looking for a weakness. The rest of the night passed in fragments, half sleep, half listening. Every creak of the wood, every shift in the wind felt like a warning. Myra didn't sleep at all. Liam noticed her whispering to herself, the words too quiet to catch. When the first light of dawn finally touched the snow, the yard was empty again. Only a new trail of footprints showed where they had been. Liam stepped outside, the cold biting at his skin. He followed the prints a short way. They didn't lead far before splitting into 3 different directions. Whoever they were, they knew how to make tracking them almost impossible. When he returned inside, Mira was still at the table, eyes locked on the door. The baby was asleep again, her tiny breaths making little clouds in the morning air. Liam closed the door and leaned against it. "They'll be back," he said. Mira didn't argue. She simply nodded, as if she had known that from the start. Liam poured himself a cup of coffee, staring at the steam curling upward. He didn't know how he was going to protect them, but he knew one thing: sending them away was no longer an option. The hunters had found their trail, and that meant the fight would come here sooner or later. And as he looked across the table at the small, determined girl holding her sister, Liam realized something else: those hunters had no idea who they were dealing with. The morning passed slowly. Liam busied himself with small chores around the house, but his mind was fixed on the shadows from the night before. Every time he glanced toward the kitchen, Myra was in the same place, sitting with her sister in her arms, her eyes alert and distant. She barely moved except to feed the baby small sips of milk. Finally, as the sun reached its highest point, Liam sat down across from her. He placed a plate of bread and cheese on the table. "Eat," he said gently. Mira hesitated, then broke off a small piece, chewing slowly as if every bite took effort. Liam waited until she swallowed before speaking. "I can't help you if I don't know." "What's happening?" he said. "Last night you said they wanted her blood. What does that mean?" Mira's fingers tightened on the blanket wrapped around the baby. She stared down for a long time before answering, "Her blood." "It is different," she whispered. "Our people. Some are born with it, very few. It can heal, make the body stronger, even help with sickness. Traders pay much for it." Liam frowned, "And they take it from children?" He asked. Mira's silence was answer enough. Her jaw trembled, but she kept her gaze on the sleeping baby. "They took my parents first," she continued. "Then they came for us. We ran." Her voice broke on the last word. Liam felt a cold weight settle in his chest. This wasn't just a case of two lost children, they were being hunted like animals. "Where were you running to?" Liam asked. Mira shook her head. "I didn't know. Just away. Always away." Her eyes flicked to the window as if the very word away might bring danger closer. Liam leaned back, rubbing a hand over his face. "And you found me?" he said quietly. Mira nodded once. "I thought humans would not give us back," she murmured. "The others said, you are stubborn." That almost made Liam smile. But there was no joy in it. "We can be," he said. "But stubborn doesn't stop bullets." Myra's eyes darkened. "They will not stop," she said. "They have ships, friends in bad places. Even if you send us away, they will follow." Liam stared at her for a moment, weighing his options. He had never asked for this fight, never planned for it, but the idea of opening his door and sending them into that cold with hunters at their heels was something he couldn't stomach. "You're staying," he said. The words were firm, not a question. Myra's lips parted in surprise. She studied him for a moment, as if trying to see if he meant it. Then, slowly, she nodded. But the decision brought new problems. He couldn't keep them hidden here forever. The hunters would return maybe in daylight, maybe at night tanned each time they came. They would come better prepared. Liam needed a plan. The rest of the day passed in a tense quiet. Mira spoke little, but she began to move around the kitchen more, helping without being asked. She kept the baby close at all times, never letting her out of sight. Every time Liam stepped outside to check the yard, Mira's eyes followed him until he returned. By late afternoon, clouds began to roll in, heavy and gray, promising more snow. Liam was chopping firewood when he saw something in the distance, a flicker of movement along the tree line. It was too far to make out details, but the way it moved made his skin tighten. He stacked the last log quickly and went back inside. "They're watching," he told Mira. She didn't look surprised. "They always watch first," she said softly. "To learn." That night, as the wind picked up again, Liam sat at the table with Mira. The baby slept in a small basket near the stove. Mira's eyes were fixed on the flames. "If something happens to me," she said suddenly, "you must take her far. Find my uncle. His name is Sarith. He will protect her." "Nothing's going to happen to you," Liam said. His voice was steady, but his hands clenched on the table. Myra gave a small, sad smile. "You do not know them," she said. "They do not forget. They do not forgive. They do not stop." Liam didn't argue. He only thought about the rifle leaning against the wall, the small amount of ammunition he had left, and the long road to the nearest human outpost. The fire popped, sending a small shower of sparks into the stove's glass window. For a moment, Liam imagined what life had been like for her before this, running through strange worlds, hiding in shadows, always looking over her shoulder. And for the first time he realized that even if the hunters were gone, Mira might never stop looking over her shoulder when they finally turned in for the night. Liam lay awake for a long time, listening to the wind and the faint sound of Mira's quiet breathing from the other room. He knew tomorrow could bring anything a chance to escape. Another fight, or worse. And somewhere out there in the snow, he knew the hunters were waiting, learning and planning. The storm came without warning. By evening, the snow was falling thick and fast, the wind howling like some restless beast. Liam had just finished boarding up the back window when he heard a sharp thud against the side of the house. It wasn't the sound of snow or falling branches. It was heavier, deliberate. Myra froze where she stood by the stove, clutching the baby to her chest, her eyes locked with Liam's, and in that moment, neither needed words. They both knew what it meant. Another thud followed, this time at the front. Then the muffled crunch of footsteps circling the house. Liam's hand went straight to the rifle leaning against the wall. He checked the chamber by habit, the metal cold and unforgiving against his fingers. Under the table now, he said firmly. Myra hesitated. Go, he repeated. She crouched down, tucking the baby beneath the heavy quilt, pulling the chairs around them like a shield. The baby stirred, but didn't cry. Myra's hand was pressed gently over her tiny mouth, her own breath coming in quick bursts. The first real blow came at the door. A deep crack echoed through the house as wood splintered under force. Liam aimed at the doorframe, his pulse pounding in his ears. Who's there? He called. His voice came out low, steady. There was no answer, only the sound of claws or boots scraping against the wood. Then, without warning, the door burst inward. Two tall figures surged inside, their skin a mottled dark color, eyes glowing. Faintly in the dim light, they moved fast, too fast for ordinary men. Liam fired. The blast echoed like thunder in the small room. One of the intruders staggered back, clutching its shoulder. But the other kept coming, knocking over a chair in its path. Myra ducked lower, curling herself around the baby. Liam swung the rifle like a club, catching the second attacker across the face. The alien snarled, revealing sharp teeth, and lunged again. The two crashed into the kitchen table, sending plates and cups flying. The wounded intruder roared something in a harsh, guttural language. The second began to circle, trying to get past Liam toward Myra. Liam shifted his stance, blocking the way. Not a step closer, he growled. The one with the wounded shoulder made a sudden move toward the baby. Liam fired again. The shot caught it in the leg, dropping it to the floor. Its scream was high and piercing, the sound making the baby whimper under the quilt. The second attacker lunged again, but Liam braced himself and shoved hard, forcing it back toward the open doorway. Snow swirled inside, the cold air biting at his face. With a final push, he sent it stumbling outside. He slammed the door shut and dropped the bar across it. His breath came in clouds, sweat cold on his skin. From outside came the sound of retreating footsteps, and then silence except for the wind. Liam stood still for a moment, listening, making sure it wasn't a trick. Myra slowly crawled out from under the table, her eyes wide. Are they gone? She asked in a whisper. For now, Liam said, though he didn't believe it himself. He glanced at the splintered doorframe, at the snow already drifting in through the gaps. The house was no longer the safe shelter it had been. Myra sat on the floor with the baby, rocking her back and forth. Her hands trembled, not just from cold, but from the aftershock of fear. They will come again, she said softly. And more will come, Liam nodded. Then we can't wait for them, he replied. He moved quickly, gathering supplies: a few blankets, food, wrapped in cloth, a small tin of bullets. He strapped the rifle over his shoulder. The decision already made, Myra looked up at him, her eyes questioning. We're leaving? We have to, Liam said. If they break through with more men, we won't stand a chance. The wind outside howled louder, shaking the old walls. Liam wrapped the baby securely in blankets and handed her back to Myra. He took one last look around the kitchen, the warm stove, the chair by the fire, the life he was leaving behind, and felt a heavy knot in his chest. They stepped out into the snow, the cold biting instantly. The tracks from the attackers were still fresh, leading back toward the tree line, but Liam turned in the opposite direction. Toward the frozen hills, toward the faint promise of safety miles away. Behind them, the farmhouse stood dark and battered. A broken door swinging slightly in the wind, and somewhere in the shadows of the forest, unseen eyes were already watching. The snow crunched under Liam's boots with every step. The wind tore at his coat, trying to push him back toward the farmhouse. But there was no going back now. Mira followed close behind, clutching the baby to her chest. Her eyes darted left and right, scanning the white wilderness as if danger could rise from beneath the snow at any moment. The path ahead was barely visible, the world swallowed by falling flakes. Liam knew the human outpost was miles away, and the only way to get there without being spotted was to take the long route through the forest and over the frozen creek. It would be slower, colder, but safer, at least for now. "We have to keep moving," he said over the wind. Myra nodded. But he could see the strain in her steps. She was light, too light. Her strength eaten away by days of hunger and fear. Every now and then, she stumbled, but never loosened her hold on the baby. Liam's mind kept returning to the hunters. He knew they wouldn't give up easily. They had followed these girls through snow and darkness before, and now they would follow him too, if they caught up out here. There would be nowhere to hide. By midday, they reached the cover of the trees. The forest was silent, except for the creak of branches under snow. Liam called for a stop, letting Myra rest on a fallen log. He handed her a strip of dried meat and a small flask of water. She shook her head at the meat, but drank. Passing the flask over the baby's lips next, "You need your strength," he said firmly. "If you fall, I can't carry all three of us." Her eyes met his for a moment. Then, she took a small bite, chewing slowly. "Where are we going?" she asked. "There's a human outpost," Liam said. "If we reach it, they'll protect you. And they'll have supplies for the baby. And if we don't reach it?" she asked quietly. Liam didn't answer. He just checked the rifle again. Making sure the last few bullets were still there, they moved again, following the narrow deer trail through the woods. The snow here was deeper, making every step harder. The baby slept most of the time, her tiny breaths warm against Mira's chest. But as the afternoon faded, the little one began to stir and whimper. Myra slowed, rocking her gently. That was when Liam heard the faint crunch of snow behind them, too steady to be the wind or falling ice. He raised his hand, signaling Myra to stop. She froze, eyes wide. The sound came again. "Closer this time. They've found us," Liam whispered. Myra's grip on the baby tightened. "What do we do?" Liam's eyes scanned the forest. They couldn't outrun them in the snow. Not with the baby. The only choice was to make the hunters lose their trail. "This way," he said. Turning sharply off the path, they moved between thick pines, the branches heavy with snow. Liam brushed their tracks with his coat as they went. The sound of pursuit grew fainter, but not gone. The hunters were clever. They would split up, search in wide arcs until they caught sight or scent of them again. Liam's stomach twisted. He had been in hunts before, but never on the side of the prey. As dusk settled, the forest grew darker. The temperature dropped sharply. Every breath came out as white steam. Myra was shivering now, the baby wrapped in layers, but still small and fragile against the cold. Finally, Liam spotted a hollow under a fallen tree, large enough to crawl into. "We'll hide here for the night," he said. Myra hesitated, glancing back toward the direction they'd come. "They'll keep looking," she warned. "That's why we keep moving before dawn," he said. "But for now, you and the baby need warmth." Inside the hollow, the snow muffled the wind. Liam built the smallest fire he could manage, just enough for heat without light spilling far. Mira sat close to it, holding her sister so the baby's tiny hands could feel warmth again. For the first time all day, there was a moment of quiet. Liam used it to think. The outpost was still a full day's journey away, maybe more in this snow. They'd need to cross the open creek in the morning, and that would leave them exposed. If the hunters guessed their route, that's where they'd strike, as he stared into the fire. An idea formed dangerous, but maybe their only chance. Tomorrow I'll draw them away, he said suddenly. Mira's head snapped up. No. She said sharply, they'll kill you. They'll kill all of us if we stay together. He replied, if they see me alone, they'll follow me. You can take the baby and keep moving to the outpost. Her eyes burned. You saved us. I will not leave you. Liam shook his head. This isn't about me. It's about keeping her safe. He nodded toward the baby. She's the reason they're chasing us, not me. The argument hung between them. Mira's jaw set, her hands tightening on the blanket. She didn't agree. But she didn't say no again. Outside, somewhere far in the trees, a sound echoed faintly, a long, low whistle. The same call Liam had heard the night before. The hunters were still out there, still searching, and by morning they would be closer. The first light of dawn was pale and cold. Snow clung to the branches above, falling in soft clumps. When the wind stirred, Liam stirred the small fire to life one last time before stamping it out. They couldn't leave any sign they had stayed here. Mira adjusted the blanket around the baby, her face pale but set with determination. They moved quickly. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Every crack of a branch underfoot felt like it echoed for miles. Liam led them toward the creek, his eyes scanning ahead. He knew crossing here was risky. The open space would make them easy targets, but it was the fastest way to the outpost. When they reached the edge, the frozen water gleamed under a thin layer of snow. Liam tested it with his boot. It held, but a deep groan rolled through the ice. Warning them to move carefully, one at a time, he said. Mira stepped forward, holding the baby close. Her small feet barely made a sound. Liam followed a few steps behind, keeping his rifle ready. That was when he heard the soft crunch of snow. Not behind them this time, but ahead. From the trees on the far side, 3 figures emerged, dark shapes against the white. Their eyes locked on Mira and the baby. One of them shouted in a language Liam didn't know, and they began to move forward, spreading out. Mira, run. Liam barked. She didn't hesitate, turning toward the far bank and moving as fast as she dared on the slick surface. Liam raised his rifle and fired. The shot cracked through the air, one of the hunters staggering back with a cry. The others kept coming, moving low and fast. Liam backed up, firing again. His second shot hit the ice near their feet, a jagged crack racing outward. The lead hunter froze for a second, but then leaped aside. Avoiding the break, Mira reached the far bank. Scrambling up onto solid snow, go. Liam shouted, don't stop. She hesitated for half a heartbeat, her eyes locking with his. Then she turned and ran into the trees, vanishing into the white. The hunters shifted their focus to Liam. Their steps quickened, spreading wide to box him in. Liam fired his last shot, hitting one square in the chest. The alien fell hard, sliding across the ice. The other lunged at him, and they crashed together. Sliding toward the deep center of the creek, the ice groaned again, a deep warning from below. Liam shoved hard. Breaking free, he scrambled back toward the bank as a large sheet cracked and fell away, dragging the hunter into the freezing black water. The alien's scream was swallowed by the current beneath the ice. The final hunter, seeing the others gone, turned and fled into the trees. Liam staggered onto solid ground, his breath burning in his lungs. His fingers were numb, his body aching, but he didn't stop. He followed the faint trail Mira had left in the snow. It took nearly an hour to catch up. When he finally saw her, she was kneeling in the snow. The baby safe in her arms, her eyes widened in shock. She began, but her voice broke. She stood and met him halfway. You made it, she whispered. He gave a tired nod. So did you. The rest of the journey to the outpost was a blur of snow and cold. Liam barely felt his legs by the time the tall wooden gates came into view. A human guard shouted from the wall, waving them forward within. Minutes, they were inside, wrapped in heavy coats. Warm air surrounding them, for the first time since that night at the farmhouse. Myra let herself relax. The baby slept peacefully. Her eyes found Liam's, and for the first time since they'd met, she smiled. It was small, tired, but real. I told you I'd pay you back, she said softly. He gave a small laugh. You owe me nothing. But Myra shook her head. A debt of life is not nothing. She said, one day I will return it. Years later, on another winter's night. Liam would hear a knock on his door again. He opened it to find a young woman standing there, tall, strong, her pale green skin catching the light of the lantern. She smiled, and behind her stood soldiers in fine armor. I'm grown now, Mira said, and I've come to keep my promise.